The bit wars of the 90s was an interesting time to live through. Each kid pledged loyalty to their side, jumped into the foxhole, ready to defend their console until their last breath. Okay, that's a bit extreme, but the console wars were like nothing many gamers have experienced since. Many of us had one or the other. In most cases, Genesis or Super Nintendo, unless you were that spoiled rich kid down the street that seemed to have everything. Yeah, you know, the same kid who had that massive 55-inch flat screen that you could only see when sitting directly in front of it. Anyway, as Sega kids, we were promised blast processing and told Sega did what Nintendo don't. But when it came down to it, it was hard to argue that the Super Nintendo gave their fans games that made Sega kids outright envious. I always remember seeing Donkey Kong for the first time and immediately feeling that maybe I had picked the wrong side. But for a console that came out a full 2 years before the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis did some truly impressive stuff. In some cases, the Genesis pulled off graphics that it had no business doing. Today, on this video, I'm going to be discussing games on the Genesis that truly blew our mind and gave Nintendo a true run for its money. Before we get started, I think it's important that we briefly discuss blast processing. What was mostly a marketing term of the 90s did, however, have a shred of truth to it. Unlike the SNES, the Sega Genesis did not have a dedicated chip that was utilized for things such as screen rotation and sprite scaling. What the Genesis did have, however, was two CPUs that could run at 7.6 MHz, almost double the SNES processing speed of 3.58. The Genesis also could achieve a higher resolution. Faster CPU and bus speed of the Sega Genesis allowed the console to run games at a much faster pace and allowed developers to give the illusion of sprite scaling and screen rotation, which gave us some amazing titles that blew our minds. One of those titles being Rocket Knight. Developed by Konami in 1993, it was a third-party exclusive built for the Sega Genesis. Graphically, this was a pretty advanced platformer. The game featured parallax scrolling and lightning-fast gameplay, whether you were blasting off in Sparkster's rocket pack or attacking multiple enemies with your boomerang. This game also gave us some pretty amazing lighting and reflecting visuals that were later utilized in other Konami games. Check out my video, Bit Wars Episode 2, to see some of these effects used side by side in Castlevania Bloodlines. Number 2, Ranger X. Ranger X is a side-scrolling run-and-gun shooter for the Sega Genesis. Developed by GAU Entertainment and published by Sega. The game was released in 1993. Strap yourself in and be ready for a pretty sizable challenge. The game isn't easy, but the graphics will keep you wanting more, featuring 3D-like level designs and amazing lighting. In particular, the forest zone, which will change lighting seamlessly while you move under and above the forest canopy. Number 3. Vectorman. Sega's answer to Donkey Kong Country was developed by Blue Sky Software and released in late '95. The game uses pre-rendered graphics to give the game an almost 3D-like effect, much like what we saw in Donkey Kong, and plays seamless on the Sega Genesis. What many said couldn't be done on the Genesis, Blue Sky pulled off from screen rotation to almost polygon-looking graphics. This is a staple and great example of what the Genesis could do visually. Number 4. The Adventures of Batman and Robin. The Adventures of Batman and Robin was published by Sega and released in November of 1994. It's based on the animated series. This is one of the best looking games on the Sega Genesis, utilizing the full power of the console from sprite scaling to screen rotation. The game starts off as a standard run and gun beat 'em up with a pretty basic level design. As it scales its difficulty up, you are met with some amazing graphics. If you can commit to perfecting this game, it is absolutely worth the trouble for simply being able to experience the visual effects of the later stages. Number 5. Zero Tolerance. Zero Tolerance is a 1994 video game developed by Technopop and published by Accolade exclusively for the Mega Drive Sega Genesis. It was one of the very few first-person shooters for the console. During the 16-bit era, most of us played first-person shooters on PC. Doom, Quake, and Wolfenstein were all unrivaled and had lackluster ports to the consoles. However, this wasn't the case for Zero Tolerance. While visually not up to par with the FPS games on the computer, this game plays very well. The fact that the Genesis did not offer true sprite scaling technology just goes to show how well Technopop took full advantage of the Genesis processing power. By re-rendering sprites to move forward and back on screen, and even get blowback when shot with the shotgun.
Handgun collected. Handgun collected. Ammunition is low.
Number 6. Virtua Racing. It's almost not fair to put this game on here due to the cartridge having an extra chip that allowed for more power, but because us Sega kids could go to the store, buy a cartridge off the shelf, and put it on our Genesis and experience polygon gaming, it makes the list for that. Originally developed by AM2 for the arcades, this got its port to the Genesis in 1994. If you want to see the full tech rundown and how this game was able to do what it did, be sure to check out the channel Super Mega Graphics 16 video on it. I have that linked in the description below. Number 7. The Lost World Jurassic Park. The Lost World is a video game developed by Appaloosa Interactive and published by Sega. It was released on September 16, 1997. One of the last games released on the Genesis. It's no surprise the developers were seasoned on how to make games look great on the console. The game plays as a standard overhead action adventure, but has some great art style and colors. The vehicles are pre-rendered, giving them more depth, and the boss battles utilize some amazing techniques, making them look 3D with scaling effects. Number 8. Super Thunder Blade, a combat flight simulation game developed by Sega. It's pretty amazing this game was released so early on in the Sega Genesis lifespan. Released in 1990 in North America, you control a helicopter which is used to attack a group of gorillas. The helicopter itself uses guns and missiles and can also air brake. This game is taking full advantage of the processing power of both CPUs, as the game constantly has to render and re-render sprites to give it the look of scaling. This game doesn't always make these types of best looking games for the Sega Genesis videos, but when you factor in how early on in the lifespan of the Genesis this game is, and what's going on under the hood to make these visual effects happen, you'll have a better appreciation for this game. Number 9. Red Zone. Red Zone is a 1994 scrolling shooter game developed by Xerox and published by Time Warner Interactive for the Sega Genesis. FMV on the Sega Genesis? Well, not really, but it sure as hell looks like it. The FMV-like scenes in the beginning and cutscenes of this game are a way of coloring and utilizing vector-style artwork and graphics. We of course didn't know this as kids and frankly didn't care. This looked amazing. At the time, this gave us Sega kids a tick in the win column. At first glance, the gameplay looks like a standard urban or jungle strike style game, until you actually start moving and get the feel of a full 3D environment. Some fancy stuff is going on under the hood to give us this look. If you want to learn more on how this was achieved, I have linked a video in the description to the Coding Secrets video describing on how all of this went down for Red Zone. Well, everyone, there you have it. 9 games that blew our mind and made us proud to be Sega kids. I would encourage you to go back and check out all these games again. Amazingly, they have all stood the test of time and in my opinion have aged gracefully over the years, becoming staples to show off the graphical capabilities of the system that gave us blast processing. I hope you liked the video. If you did, subscribe and stick around for a while. If you feel like I missed one of your favorite games, drop a comment in the comments section. If you want to support the channel, become a channel member. We do members only retro live streams where we go back and experience these games and replay these games together. Until next time, do you even blast processing, bro? I'll see you on the next video.